We get this question a lot. You know, when you're lifting in a way that is not using your legs to produce a lot of force, you can always use any kind of shoe you want. Good news about Crocs, they shelter your toes and they're made of rubber. They're a great lifting shoe.
It really comes down to what works for you and how better you can adhere to it.
Okay, now let's get into training. And the first one would be meat for fat loss.
Underrated, vastly. I think people tend to see cardio as this like thing that I have to put in. Like I take a pill for my vitamin B12 and I do cardio. Like it's a thing I take and it has this effect and then I go on about my day. The problem is when you do a sufficient amount of cardio, adaptive thermogenesis is a real big deal. And your body, if you're cutting hard enough or long enough, your body basically starts to make you, your brain makes you do less activity in the other times of the day. So you could have started your cut at 10,000 steps a day, increased your cardio on the treadmill while your activity everywhere else declines. You may end your cut, you think you're like, well, I added a bunch of cardio. You may only end it at 11,000 steps a day, which is 100 steps a day more. It's not that much. I'm a much bigger fan of step tracking. And if you do your cardio while step tracking, that's great. Then you do it on top of the steps. So what you tell yourself is, okay, I'm going to get 12,000 steps every day. Either that's including cardio or it's not. I'm going to get 12,000 every day. Or you can say to yourself, on the cardio days, I'm going to get 12,000. On my regular days, I'm going to get at least 8,000. That way your cardio days don't end up just being the same amount of physical activity, but they end up being more, and it actually gets you the fat burning that you're interested in getting.
Okay. What about the number, the magic 10,000 steps number? Is that overrated, underrated? Where does it fall?
I think it's rated pretty appropriately. I think anything less than 5,000, and you're not making serious effort at physical activity, and it's probably not good for your health. Anything between 5 to 10,000 is very fine. Anything between 10 and 15,000 is a very good attempt at a high level of activity, and it'll probably support your NEAT very well, and you'll have no problems cutting. Anything between 15 and 20,000 is difficult for many people to sustain because it's very fatiguing, but is profoundly calorie burning, and you can lose a lot of fat by barely altering your macros just by getting that much activity. And what I would say is if you're going over 15,000 steps, it should probably be just a part of your job or lifestyle. It's not something I would try to get on a treadmill because, good God, that is hours on a treadmill every day. And anything north of 20,000 is very situation specific, and many people just can't handle it chronically. So that's my best answer. So 10,000 to that extent is a good breaking point of like, under 10,000, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. Over 10,000, you're very, very serious. And I'll put you this way. If someone tells me they're getting at least 10,000 steps a day, their physical activity is no longer my concern as a coach as to what's stopping them from getting their results. So if they're struggling with results and say, hey, my diet isn't my physical activity, and I go, well, how many steps do you get? And they have a fitness tracker, and they say, I get at least 10,000 every day. Physical activity is not my concern. I'm like, let's talk about what you're eating. And they're like, well, I kind of get a lot of steps when I walk into the donut shop and eating donuts, and I see. Okay, there's the real culprit. Okay,
got it. Now, when it comes to hypertrophy, supersets are overrated or underrated?
Probably overrated. People think supersets give you some sort of magical thing. They just allow you to take that muscle and have it or be close to failure for longer, which is nice because that's where most of the gains come from. But there's many other ways to do that. Myo reps can do that for you. Just as well as supersets, and you don't even have to switch exercises. So supersets are a tool, but they're not some kind of like thing you have to have or something like that.
Okay. What about utilizing motivation for getting through the mesocycle? Overrated or underrated?
Overrated. I think a lot of people, when we talk about motivation, I think maybe what people really meant by that is sort of like discipline, right? Like, I got to do this, right? Sort of purposeful efforts to try to lift motivation. And if you have to do that in the last week before deload, it makes sense. It means you're pushing yourself hard enough. Anyone who doesn't have to push themselves during the last week, I would say is either really psychotic about training, which is great, or just not pushing themselves hard enough. However, if the other weeks of your mesocycle, except for maybe the last one, you have to use a lot of willpower and discipline, gee whiz, you probably not, early in a training career, that might be something you have to do. But when you get into training for months and months and months, if you still have to just grind to get to the gym, you might be able to pick another hobby that you like better because you probably just hate it. Most of us lifters, you don't need any motivation at all or any discipline or willpower. We just show up because we love it. And sometimes it gets tough, and then we get into the discipline part. But most of the mesocycle should be just something you think is really fun and you should be excited to go.
utilizing shoes, specific shoes, or anything that like a good type of shoe for lifting, is that something that is overrated or underrated?
Greatly underrated. I think anyone who has very serious aspirations in hypertrophy and wants the biggest legs possible should be, at very least, having a basic weightlifting shoe. And if you don't have a weightlifting shoe, you're not, to me, very serious about hypertrophy in your lower body, or you just don't know. And that's okay not to know. But now everyone watching this, they know, and they can get out and get a weightlifting shoe. It makes a huge difference. It allows you to transfer the load more to the quads. It allows you to stay more upright. So not only does it make lifting probably safer and more stable, but it allows you to get a huge stimulus to your quads. Every machine turns into a more well-angled machine. Every hack squat, leg press, even free weights, high bar squat is now more targeted to quads, less systemic loading on your back. Weightlifting shoes are great. And unfortunately, I see a lot of pro bodybuilders wear those like atomic shoes, and wear other just regular gym shoes when they train legs, and it's all like it's all not a good idea. Somebody in your comments just asked, wrestling shoes work as lifting shoes? No, they're terrible. It's one of the worst possible lifting shoes. It might be okay for deadlifting because it gets you lower to the ground, but just go to like Titan support systems and get yourself a deadlifting slipper, and it's 10 times better. Problem with the weightlifting shoe is actually the weightlifting shoe has a heel that curves, because it's designed for that, because you're designed to be moving around, and every possible way you can put your feet on the mat gets you traction. The problem is the shoes are also curved like this because they're designed to sink into the mat. That's a good thing, but when you're on the ground, your point of contact with a weightlifting shoe, with a wrestling shoe, is just very low, and it literally encourages your feet to roll, because it's good with your feet roll in wrestling because you're less likely to get tilted over. Your feet rolling and squatting and deadlifting, good God, that's a terrible idea. Weightlifting shoes are nice. I've worn them when I was a weightlifter. As soon as you're done weightlifting, you throw them the fuck out, or just put them on your little successful trophy rack of sports I did, and then get a weightlifting shoe and go to town. I didn't mean to rant to that person either, all with the best intentions.
Okay, that sounds good. And what about when you have no weightlifting shoes, or like some people might be too expensive? Is that a good alternative to use? Is barefoot training a good idea?
No, because in barefoot training, the sole of your foot tends to sweat, and then the sweat on the top of your foot also goes over and gets to your sole, and you slip. Every time I train barefoot, I almost die. Shoes are better than barefoot for almost everything. Even for running, there used to be a barefoot running craze, and then most people realized that shoes are better. So barefoot training would be last, maybe second to last if you have some really wobbly shoe. If you have like shoes like a 3-inch heels for going out, okay, yeah, barefoot's better than that because of massive instability. But I would say a good second alternative is like work boots, like hiking boots or work boots, something with a really solid heel and an elevated heel, something that really lets you grip the ground. Holy shit, that's a really, really good start. And also someone just said Converses or Vans. Those are great shoes too because they have a really flat sole. They're awesome. And usually my favorite shoe that I wear every day is a Vans knockoff that I get at Walmart that costs like $10. So I don't have a whole lot of money. I got to make sure I spend my money well, and I buy those shoes. They last for 2 years, then I throw them away, and I get another $10 pair of shoes. Boom.
Perfect. What about mind-muscle connection for hypertrophy and strength?
For strength, it's actually a really bad idea because you should be paying attention to movement mechanics and explosiveness. For hypertrophy, it's probably adequately rated, but not always by the right people. Okay. Some people who are really small and shrimpy and don't have good technique are worried about mind-muscle connection. What they should be worrying about, or worrying is a bad term, concerning themselves with, is getting good technique and learning how to push themselves hard. But people who have good technique and know how to push themselves hard, then they really need to benefit from the mind-muscle connection because it can increase the stimulus and decrease the fatigue of the lift substantially.
Okay. What about variety in exercise selection for fatigue management?
Overrated, because most people who use variation in exercise selection to manage fatigue don't understand volume and intensity manipulations, and then they end up just not ever deloading because they just pick another exercise when they get too stale with another one. But the joints and stuff are still taking a hit. Systemically, you're still taking a hit, and you have a tendency to burn out for a while and just leave the gym for 2 or 3 weeks. So I would say, in addition to that, a lot of times exercises that are causing you a lot of progression, even if you're a little bit bored with them, you should stick to them because they're clearly working. Like if you're able to add 10 pounds to your squat every week and you just keep going and going and going, I wouldn't really like put squats on the back burner. If I'm like, I don't feel like squatting today, well, shut the fuck up. Keep squatting because you're going to get huge legs. And, variation good is good. It has its purposes, but a lot of fatigue management should be accomplished by volume intensity variation. So same exercise, and you lower the load and or lower the frequency and or lower the amount of volume, proximity to failure, so on and so forth. And all of a sudden you can still be very technical with the same exercises, take a little bit of a break, and then come back and still build on those same exercises.
Okay. When we talk about training intensity for hypertrophy and strength, so like this quote unquote, every training should be heavy.
Heavy, like weight heavy, or like hard, like psychologically?
Very heavy. Very heavy.
Oh, very heavy.
Weights, loads.
Heavy load. Yeah, I mean, like anything in the overrated, because most people who think that this way tend to be just basing it on ego. And sets anything between 5 and 30 reps roughly is very effective, probably roughly equivalently for hypertrophy. And going heavy usually means less than 5 reps per set. And that actually doesn't work as well. It confers a lot of fatigue and not as much stimulus. So I would say it's probably overrated.
Okay. Low reps for strength.
If it's fewer than sets of 3, overrated. If it's sets of like 3 to 6, then it's properly rated. A lot of people think singles and doubles get you strong. They can, but they don't get you strong as well as sets of 3 to 6, because singles and doubles confer a lot of fatigue without as much stimulus because the volume is low. And the total amount of signaling of high force production to all the parts of your muscle is just not that high from a set of 1. It's just a set of 1. Your muscles are like, oh, what's that? We should grow. We should get stronger. Nope, nobody's saying anything again. Okay, fine. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But if you're doing 5 repetitions, they're all really heavy, and it's a lot of signaling, and that works out better.
Okay. Lifting belt. Is it good, bad, underrated, overrated?
Probably overrated for the average gym goer. You see people like, so first of all, if you are able to keep your belt on between sets, your belt's not tight enough and it's doing almost nothing. So people don't know what kind of belt to get. They don't know how to properly put it on. So I would say generally overrated, but the belt is great and it can be used very, very well. If you start to notice that your core is a limiting factor and your legs can be pushed further with a belt, it's time probably to start wearing a belt. So for some people it is, the belt is underrated because they won't use one for some reason because they think, I don't want my core to get weak. Your core doesn't get weak if you use a belt. Everything gets stronger, but you have to know how to use a belt. You have to use the appropriate belt, and it's not magic.
Utilizing knee sleeves, is that overrated or underrated when it comes to squats or other similar?
Some people need them, but I'd say overrated. Some people use knee sleeves so they think they have to use them because they confer some kind of special advantage. If your knees tend to hurt and they hurt less than knee sleeves, you should wear them. Otherwise, there's probably no real advantage of knee sleeves whatsoever. If people say, well, it helps warm up my knees. Okay, well, if you don't wear knee sleeves, does it hurt your knees? No. So clearly your knees are warm enough, I guess. I think a lot of people, I went through this phase too, they get into powerlifting, bodybuilding, and they want to belong. They want to sort of confer a level of seriousness about themselves. They want to be the person in the gym that's no longer just a guy who works out. They want the other powerlifters and bodybuilders who are more jacked and have more Instagram influencers to see them and be like, this guy knows. So a great way to do that is to put on knee sleeves, because then you separate yourself from all the plebes and the regular people and grandma. Get out of my face, grandma, I got knee sleeves. I'm a pro powerlifter, pro bodybuilder, or some stuff like that. And while I do agree that pushing old people in the face is generally good practice, then it's a little joke, there's a little sarcasm there. Maybe it's not a joke, who knows? Crazy Americans, right? Generally speaking, knee sleeves, way more people wear them that don't need them than don't wear them that do need them. Okay.
Genetics.
Oh.
When it comes to genetics for strength gain and fat loss, is that overrated or underrated?
Underrated, like crazy. So probably something like 70% of all the variation in body weight in modern populations is due to genetics. So genetics is enormous influence. And this applies to hypertrophy, it applies to strength, it applies to fat loss. You can see this in clients you train. Some clients clearly have bad genetics. Kind of nothing you do works, and you're like, what the hell is going on? Do I just not know anything? And then people that have exceptional genetics, everything seems to work, and nothing at all seems to work too. So I think that genetics are hugely, hugely underrated. But some people do overrate them and kind of use them as a crutch or a limiting factor or an excuse. Maybe they just have missed the context or just don't know yet. So for example, where you start doesn't really say a whole lot about where you're going to end up. I started lifting, I was 100 pounds, and now I'm 240 or whatever, and nobody would have predicted, myself included, that I was ever going to get massive. But I just kept adding muscle. So some people at 100 pounds, they'll gain to when they're 110, and they're like, well, I clearly have shitty genetics. Well, that's probably not true. Whereas on the other hand, people who have been grinding away for 5 years, and they're still very small, still very weak. They've been doing everything right. They've read Greg Knuckles' website front to back, back to front. They do everything super well. They're very nuanced. Once you do that, it's very unlikely that you're missing some great, crazy thing in nutrition or training that's going to unlock your gains. You're probably just not ever going to be super jacked, and that's okay, because there's being super jacked is of incredibly low relevance to most things in society, including your own happiness. So I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, we have to recognize genetics is very powerful.
Isolation over compound exercises for hypertrophy.
Yeah, I think people who say that is overrated, because people who say that usually don't know how to do compounds properly. If you learn how to do a squat properly, it is no longer a very fatiguing exercise to your system and your back. It is hugely quad-centric. If you know how to do leg presses, hack squats, these are compound exercises. They fry your quads like crazy, bent over row, so on and so forth. The problem is when people do compounds, usually they take a position in which uses the maximum amount of musculature. Compounds can be done in two fundamental ways, ends of a spectrum. One is a compound biased towards a target muscle. Another end of the spectrum is a compound biased to every single other muscle that makes sure that you just lift as much weight as possible. If you squat or bent row or shoulder press like this, you're going to get a lot of systemic fatigue and not a whole lot of distinct hypertrophy where you want. On the other hand, if you are doing compounds in such a way that biases towards the muscles you're targeting, they're just unbelievable tools for hypertrophy. And those targeted compounds are probably my pick for the best exercises, period, for hypertrophy. Better than isolations and better than what I would call sort of general compounds.
Training frequency for glute development, is that overrated or underrated?
On average, I would still say it's underrated. I think specifically that most of the people that are interested, maybe almost all of the people that are interested in glute development are female. And females recover so rapidly, so much more rapidly than males do, that usually the paradigms they're working with are wildly inappropriate for them. Or to put it better, they could be achieving so much more if they train more frequently. A male may recover from hard glute training once every 5 days, once every 3 or 4 days. A female might recover once every other day from the same workout. So if she's ready, if she's not sore, she's really strong, she's feeling ready to go, and it's just 2 days later, she should train her glutes again. And then it's Monday glutes, Wednesday glutes, Friday glutes, 2 days off, repeat. And I think a lot of people are training glutes once a week and expecting these crazy results. I mean, you wouldn't train your forearms or your biceps once a week and expect insane results. You'd probably be like, wow, I feel like these muscles heal really fast. I should do them again. A lot of people have really fast healing glutes, and they should train them as often as they recover.
Perfect. When it comes to hip thrust over glute bridges for glute development, are hip thrusts overrated or underrated?
This may be one of the funniest answers, at least to me anyway. Astrid, I absolutely have no idea what the difference is between those two. I thought they were the same lift. And I've seen people label those reflexively. So can you explain to me what the difference is between a glute bridge and a hip thrust?
Well, what I understand is that the hip thrust has more range of motion, like it's a fuller range of motion, versus the glute bridge is more like glute biased and like shorter range of motion. Huh. But I may be wrong. I don't know. That's what I heard.
See, it's confusing. It's very rare that you call a partial version of the same lift a different name. Like a partial squat's a partial squat. There's not like, some name for it, like dildo squat. Oh, that's a different exercise altogether. But, I have no idea. I mean, if I was to answer it, based on range of motion, it's not clear to me one of those is superior, because glutes tend to peak contract better at the very top. And if you're going too low on your hip thrusts, then you're not really activating glutes a whole lot. You're doing some other musculature there. I would say I'm not entirely convinced that various glute bridging exercises are the best things you could be doing for your glutes. I think deep sumo squats and deep sumo deficit deadlifts are at least as good. And I think that the best glute exercises are lunges. I think that's my views on the matter. Okay,
perfect. Being in an optimal body fat range for hypertrophy.
As far as like how much hypertrophy you're gaining, probably wildly overrated. As far as long-term views of your health and how easily you're going to be able to diet down to actually be lean, probably underrated. There's two distinct groups of people. There's a group of people that go from 10% body fat to 12 and think they're no longer anabolic and do a mini cut. That's really ridiculous. There's another group of people that are between 25 and 30% fat. These are males, by the way, just add roughly 10% to female. And you know, those males are between 25 and 30, and they're like, just bulking, bro, just going to step on stage eventually. Well, you're going to have like loose skin and a huge number of fat cells. And when you diet down, you're going to have all kinds of water balance issues. So staying for males under 20% generally, and for females under 30% is probably just really good best practice for most people that can do it, that are very serious about physique. And then within those ranges, it doesn't matter a whole lot.
So what you're saying is if someone is on a higher levels of body fat, they should cut first before even trying to get into a bulking phase, just because they might not be in a good insulin environment for growth. They probably could have some insulin resistance. Or what would be your take on like being in a higher body fat level to increase your calories for trying to increase your hypertrophy, like in creating a higher, but better environment, I guess?
I think it probably still works. It's probably not very good for your health. But the real question is, once you're done bulking and you want to be lean, how far down do you have to go? And what irreparable changes to your skin and your fat cells have you made? And the answer, if you get big enough, is tons. I have loose skin. When I'm on stage at a bodybuilding show, I have loose skin in my abs. It's because I have been to 30% body fat on the super permabulk on purpose. I was not there by accident. And it left my body permanently scarred. So I would highly advise people that if they are under 20% fat, or 30% as females, don't go over. There's nothing there that's good for you. And if you want to bulk more, just cut all the way back down to 12% or 22% for females, and then you got this huge 8% window of fat to do a year or two of bulking with until you get up to 20 again.
Okay. What about pursuing DOMs or like soreness in muscle for hypertrophy and strength?
Yeah. Underrated. Most people would say overrated. I would count those people as not really taking either a serious attempt at thought on the matter, or not intelligent enough to take a serious attempt at thought on the matter. That's very, very offensive, but I can explain. So if you get sore, that tells you some things. You have to understand very closely what it tells you and what it doesn't tell you. If you get sore, you may be doing too much, okay? But it's almost certainly not true that you're not doing enough. So if you're saying, hey, look, my triceps aren't growing, they get sore every time I train, and as soon as they're healed, I train again. What's wrong with my training? My number one response to you would be like, dude, I don't think there's anything wrong with your training. More specifically, I don't think you're under training. You might be overdoing it, so why don't you try to lower your volume so you get a little less sore and see if that gives you good results. On the other hand, if you never get sore in a muscle group, and you're asking the question of, should I increase my volume to try to see if I grow more? Generally, the answer to that, if we know you never get sore, is like, yeah, that might be a good idea. But if you already get super, super mega sore, what the hell is increasing volume going to do? Make you even more sore? We already know you're doing a pretty extreme amount of damage, and we know that damage competes with hypertrophy. So if you're never getting sore in a muscle group, it might be an interesting sort of intellectual little pointer for you to maybe experiment with more volume. And if you're already getting consistently sore and you're training as soon as you recover, more volume is almost certainly not the answer, and you're probably training hard enough, if not too hard. So using soreness like that is very intelligent. Using soreness of like, if I don't get sore, I'm not fucking doing it right, that's wrong. And if using soreness like, oh my God, I got sore, I'm going to die, that's also wrong.
Or like people who think that they have to be always sore to really think that they are going to get some gains.
Almost certainly false. But if you're not getting gains and you never get sore, maybe you can do more.
Okay. The last 4 questions. So when it comes to utilizing deloads for recovery, is that overrated or underrated?
Underrated. And most people don't deload often enough or don't know what a deload is. So I would say more people understood what intelligent deloading was, it would be better for most people.
So if you wanted to go just a very quick explanation of what a deload would mean, like how would you describe it?
So you take your normal training and you divide the volume by roughly half, and you divide the load by roughly half, and you don't compensate by doing closer to the same proximity to failure. You basically, like, say you were doing 100 pounds for 20 reps. On your deload, you might do 50 pounds for 10 reps. mean, it sounds like nothing, and it really is almost nothing. It allows you to keep the technical qualities of the exercise very high. Actually, light exercise is proven to recover you better than no exercise at all. It keeps your habits in place so you don't just disappear from the gym, but you can come to the gym maybe half as often, combine some workouts, do these very, very easy workouts, and then you come back and you're going to be doing super great.
How long should you be going to do a deload? Like, is that 1 week?
Usually a week.
Less than 1 week?
Usually a week,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Frequency per muscle per week for strength.
For strength, underrated. Most people don't train frequently enough. Almost all the literature says within a short time frame, the more frequently you train, the more strong you get. One of the reasons this is so effective for strength training is it gives you more practice. A big part of strength training is learning how to move properly. And name a sport in which you practice the sport once a week. What the hell? Nobody does that. People practice all the time, every day, multiple times a day. For when strength athletes practice their lifts, not all heavy, not all to failure, but sometimes lighter, sometimes heavier, sometimes really hard. They practice them more often, 3, 4, 5 times a week. The lifts tend to go up.
What flow restriction techniques for hypertrophy and strength?
Yeah, overrated like crazy. People think BFR is like some kind of magical tool that's going to get you super jacked. It's a very interesting tool. It's one that works, probably more in the short term. And it's a great tool to use if you're highly fatigued or if you're recovering from an injury, because the external load doesn't have to be very high. But other than that, it's just a way to get a pump much easier. And it's not something you like, if you don't use, you're somehow missing out. It's not a unique mechanism either. In all likelihood, if you go close to failure with higher reps and you get big pumps in the gym, you're already hitting all those pathways that BFR would be training. So it's kind of one of those, if you need BFR, it's great. If you occasionally use it for variation, it's fine. But it's not something like, because I get this question pretty often. People just one question, they go BFR, 3 question marks. I'm like, first of all, that's not a statement. It's just more of a statement with question marks after it. Not even a statement, because it's just one acronym. And second of all, it's like, what is it that you want me to tell you about it? And I think what they're asking is like, isn't this magical thing that's going to just get me jacked? Like, you see this huge bodybuilder in the gym and you're like, BFR? He's like, of course, bro. And you high five and then later end up in the locker room together. That's how I meet bodybuilders anyway. But I think people are looking for that. And what it really is just another pretty limited but decent tool in the toolbox.
That's awesome. Okay. But so far we covered all the questions that we were aiming for. So that has been so good. I hope you had some fun as well. I love your analogies as always. And I was going to ask you, do you ever think that utilizing crocs for training is sometimes good?
Only if you're Jared Feather. But if you're a Jared Feather, then you're a god that can do no wrong anyway. So we get this question a lot. When you're lifting in a way that is not using your legs to produce a lot of force, you can always use any kind of shoe you want, as long as you're not going to drop weights on your feet. Good news about Crocs, they shelter your toes, and they're made of rubber. They're a great lifting shoe unless you're training legs, and then only for Jared Feather do you get away with things like that.
I am so appreciative of your time, and thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure, and I really do mean that. Mostly when I say it's always a pleasure, I'm lying. But on your channel, I'm 100% serious.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you, Mike. I will see you very soon.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you so much for being watching. I appreciate you so much. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions or any comments, please comment below, and I'll be sure I'll answer to this as soon as I can.